right, folks, we are back here on WLTH 1370M. That is 92.7 in the FM dial, if you dare. Yes, we just finished talking about, in the first hour we talked about the ICE shooting, and we talked about, the government literally kidnapping Venezuela's president in a complete violation of international law. But speaking of international law, there's been a lot of talk very recently, you might have seen it, about Somalian-owned daycare centers. Okay, so the right wing's latest distraction from Trump not releasing the Epstein files and him and all of his friends likely being in them is Somalian daycare fraud. Like all of a sudden, and it's always something in Minnesota. I don't know why something always going on in Minnesota in this country. But they just decided all of a sudden that the most important story in the world, the most important story in the world is Somalian daycare fraud, apparently. So this really all kicked off with a viral video by supposedly independent creator Nick Shirley, who showed visits to several Somali-owned daycare centers in Minnesota that looked empty or inactive. The video claimed that these centers were still receiving public child care funds while not providing the actual services. The video was spread widely all over Twitter. I saw it 100 times and became a political flashpoint. The Trump administration, they jumped all over this. The commentators and J.D. Vance and all these people called it evidence of widespread fraud, and others saying that the claims are unproven and misleading. Now, the federal and state investigators are looking into the fraud allegations. Some of this predates the video. So Minnesota is very much a liberal state. It usually votes for the Democrats. You know, Tim Walz was the vice presidential candidate to Kamala Harris in just I guess it'd be the year before last now, in 2024. And so there has been some instances where there have been investigations into whether fraud was occurring or not in Minnesota. Some daycare centers that were spotlighted in this particular case, like the Quality Learning Center, have closed. The state licensing records do show that it's closed, but do not confirm that fraud is the reason. Another Somali-run daycare in Minneapolis was vandalized. And so once the Republicans started manufacturing sort of consent to harass these people, one of the daycare centers was literally vandalized and burgled, which is unfortunate. Also, and it's not just in Minnesota, daycare serving Somali communities in places like Columbus, Ohio, were harassed. In Washington State, Somali-run daycare centers are reporting harassments and threats, linked way back to the Minnesota viral video narrative. Civil rights groups are saying that this has sparked doxing and hostile encounters. For those that don't know, doxing is when, whether online or in person, or I guess over the phone, they overwhelm your phone with phone calls. So they overwhelm you with traffic on the internet. It's really annoying. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine actually publicly defended Somali daycare providers against online accusations and called for a calm and proper review instead of harassment against these people. Community leaders and advocacy groups are warning that these online claims are stigmatizing Somali American communities and are fueling xenophobia. Now, there's been no confirmed evidence that has yet been publicly released that shows that the specific Somali-run daycares featured in the viral video committed any fraud. Regulators are saying that inspections and licensing don't show fraud, even if other violations like safety or paperwork issues have been noted. The situation is ongoing. Investigations into child care funding and misuse continue at the state and federal levels. So like all of a sudden, out of the blue, this became the biggest issue in the country. Right as, again, Trump was supposed to release the Epstein files, and right as they needed a good distraction. But what a lot of people don't understand is that one of the reasons that we are seeing so much hostility being leveled at Somalians and Somalia is because of, once again, the state of Israel. Yeah, I know it sounds ridiculous. But I don't know if you guys recognize this. The state of Israel just recognized Somaliland, which is sort of a break-off region of it's a break-off region of the state of the country of Somalia. And virtually none of Africans consider Somaliland its own independent entity, but Israel does. Now, why would they do that? Well, there's a lot of talk about Somaliland being the place that they try to ship all of the Palestinians to. Yes, that is where they are planning to send whatever 1.5 million some Palestinians that are still alive, that haven't been murdered by Israel yet. The plan is to send them to the state of Somaliland. And so this idea that Somalia is bad, Somalians are inherently bad, a lot of this is about manufacturing consent with the American public for us to once again get involved with the conflict between Somalia and this break-off region of Somaliland that virtually no African countries recognize. Again, most countries don't recognize it, but Israel does, and apparently the United States will, because this is what they are going to use, again, to help ethnically cleanse Gazans from the Gaza Strip. And it looks like they might try to just get all the Palestinians out of there into Somaliland. And so once again, you kind of have to look at the story behind the story on these types of issues. Now, a lot of people would say, oh my God, fraud is such an important issue. And, I don't care where it's coming from, but you got to understand the Trump administration does not care about fraud whatsoever. Both Donald Trump administrations have done nothing but pardon and commute sentences of fraudsters. Like Devin Archer, who was convicted of securities fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud. He defrauded investors through a fraudulent tribal bond scheme tied to over $60 million in bonds, and was ordered to pay a restitution of $43 million. Donald Trump pardoned him, and the restitution obligation was completely wiped out. Trevor Milton, prosecutors sought as much as $680 million in restitution. Trump pardoned him, and the financial penalties are completely nullified. Todd and Julie Chrisley from the TV show Chrisley Knows Best, they were convicted of bank fraud and related wire fraud and tax charges. They were convicted of defrauding banks of over $30 million. Their restitution and remaining financial penalties were canceled by Donald Trump. And it just goes on and on. Michelle Fiore, prosecutors reported she misappropriated over $70,000 raised for a memorial project. Donald Trump pardoned her, and he pardoned her, and her financial repayment obligations were completely erased. Scott Howard Jenkins, he was sentenced to 10 years. Donald Trump pardoned him. Albert Pirro, he was convicted of conspiracy to defraud the United States, tax evasion, and fraud. Donald Trump pardoned him. Conrad Black, I know some of you might know that name. He was convicted of mail fraud and obstruction of justice. He was ordered to pay $6 million. His fraud conviction was relieved, and the financial penalties were reduced. like really, you know, there's an one of some of the commutations, the big commutations. David Gentile, who was convicted of conspiring to defraud thousands of investors in a roughly 1.6 billion with a B investor fund scheme, a Ponzi-like scheme. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Trump commuted his sentence as soon as he started serving it. And of course, probably the most famous was Philip S. Formas. Philip S. Formas, he was convicted of a conspiracy to defraud the United States via massive Medicaid fraud. He committed Medicare fraud. We have a terrible healthcare system. A lot of people are vulnerable. Philip S. Formas completely defrauded all of these people. Prosecutors said this scheme involved billions of dollars in fraudulent Medicare and Medicaid claims. Estimates cite over 1.3 billion with a B in bogus billings. He was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment and $5.5 million restitution. Donald Trump commuted his sentence with time served. He'd only served 4 years. He only served 4 years, and he later pled guilty to a reduced count after the DOJ retried him. So again, you look at this administration. This administration has been in bed with fraudsters from day one. He's pardoned and commuted the sentences of countless fraudsters, but yet they want you to believe that they care so much about Somalian daycare centers in Minnesota, no less, a liberal state. Of course not. This is about attacking a liberal state, just like when Donald Trump is sending ICE to Minneapolis and Chicago and LA. This is about attacking liberal cities, liberal states. This is about taking the focus off of the Epstein files. This is about putting them on Somalians so that they can justify, again, attacking Somalia under the guise of the freedom of Somaliland as a region, so that the Israelis can put the Palestinians in Somaliland. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This stuff is so intricate and so convoluted. But when you look at the criminality of not just this administration, but this government, I mean, it becomes very fatiguing. So, whew, man, I need to take a break. But when we get back, we're going to lighten it up a little bit. Happy happies. Happy happies. Tired of talking about this government. We'll be right back after these.